The player I'm bringing in today's video will win people fantasy championships in 2023 in best ball and redraft formats. I really believe that. Do me a massive favor, go ahead and drop a like on this video to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy football. And hey, if you want helpful articles, ways to get ahead of your league, solid rankings for this year, go ahead and use our code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off your membership over on flockfantasy.com. There's a pinned comment. You get a 2-day free trial, so go check it out. And I'm sure you'll love the site over there. Okay, so the player I'm bringing you guys today, let's do a little bit of trivia. But before we go to that trivia, just some context for the video. I did my absolute best to think about a player who's not being drafted in, let's say, the top 6 or so rounds. This is the 7th player that you could potentially draft in your fantasy leagues this year or on Underdog that could potentially give you an edge and help you win your fantasy leagues this year. So it's not like any, superstar names that are obvious, but I full-heartedly believe, and I'm going to tell you why, I believe this player will win fantasy leagues. But let's do some trivia, okay? Because what I want you guys to do is, before I even say who the player is, pause it at any point and comment down below if you got who the player is. Okay, so some trivia. The player I'm bringing you today produces his own music on the side, was a high school superstar at wide receiver and safety. He doesn't play that position, though, in the NFL. Played his college football at Georgia Tech. He is currently on his 3rd NFL team. Any guesses? Pause. Let me know in the comments below who you think it is. He changed his position early on in his professional career, broke out in his 4th season, which was 2019, and finished top 3 in fantasy at his position that year. And since that year in 2019, has finished top 10 in fantasy points per game every year at that position. Now, this player is coming off a down fantasy year. They were just traded in March of 2023. Who is it? Again, let me know who you think it is in the comments below. That player we're talking about today is Darren Waller. That's right, the Walrus. Underdog has him as the tight end 7 in their ADP and rankings. He's currently my tight end 3. And I know that's high. I have Kelsey, I have Andrews, and before Hawkinson, I personally have Darren Waller. The tight end position can either kill you, and it's just this big thorn in your side all year, or it can help you win weeks. And let me tell you, just give me this time here to tell you why I believe Darren Waller could be an absolute X factor in fantasy football this year as a New York Giant. Now, I know as I already talked about the Giants, as I'm talking about Darren Waller, there will be people rolling their eyes who are upset. Let me get through my take, and then you let me know if you disagree, okay? Firstly, a lot of time there's projecting in the NFL. Well, I think a player can do this. I think this player will get to this status this year, right? I think they can be top 5 if everything hits right. With Darren Waller, we know he can be elite at the tight end position because it's already happened in the past. We don't have to ask the question, can he really be a difference-making, tight end that wins you your matchups? We have evidence multiple years of him doing just that. In 2019 and 2020, he finished top 3 at the tight end position and helped people win their fantasy leagues. Let's look at his fantasy output actually since his breakout year. So you can see here his finish and his points per game. So since 2019, he has the high of finishing as a tight end 2, both as a finish and in points per game, and the low this year as a tight end 31. Something that is very important to keep in mind is those last 2 years in 21 and 22, he has missed 14 games combined. So that's obviously had a heavy impact on his fantasy finish. But I think often people don't give Darren Waller the respect he's actually due. Darren Waller is in a category of the elite seasons we have ever seen from a tight end, okay? The only tight ends in the last 20 years, 2 decades, to have a minimum of 107 receptions, 145 targets, and 1,100 receiving yards in a single season, there are 4 tight ends who have accomplished that in the last 20 years. Travis Kelsey, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz. Those are the only 4 tight ends who have met those numbers in a single fantasy season in the last 2 decades. So again, if there's any questions out there, can he be elite at the position? I think he's already answered that. But for Darren, here in 2023, it's new year, new me as a New York Giant. Let's discuss the status of this team and what I project his role will mean for the Giants, like what he will mean to the team, how I project, how I envision him operating in this offense. Last year, despite this team making the playoffs, the Giants that is, the biggest glaring need, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, I think we can all agree, the most obvious glaring need on this team was a true number 1 receiving threat. They did not have that on this team, and that forced them to obviously rely on Saquon Barkley maybe a little bit more than they wanted to. You saw Daniel Jones have a career high in rushing yards, even though he had a very good year through the air as well under Brian Daboll. But that team finished with the 8th fewest passing attempts per game. I promise you, Brian Daboll wants to be more balanced. He wants to let Daniel Jones grow in that area. But last year, Darius Slayton led this team in receiving yards with 724 and in targets with 71. Yet he finished just 40th in receiving yards amongst all wide receivers in the NFL and 58th in targets, again, amongst all wide receivers in the NFL. Then you look at Richie James, who led this team in receptions with 57. 57 receptions for Richie James. That is good for 44th in the NFL amongst the wide receiver position. Guys, there are 32 teams in the NFL, yet this team's leading receivers didn't even crack anywhere near the top 32 in any of these major categories, right? Darius Slayton with the 40th most receiving yards was the only one who got anywhere near close to it. I mean, that is extremely disappointing. Again, it was a clear need. And now we enter Darren Waller. To me, the reason they traded for him, it is absolutely crystal clear. He will be the number 1 alpha receiver, leading receiver in targets, receptions, receiving yards. Danny Dimes just signed a long-term deal, and the Giants needed to give him some sort of alpha receiver. They looked at their wide receiver core, all the receiving options, and said, okay, this is clearly a huge need for us. And I am under the belief that they were aware they weren't going to get Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, and JSN. I don't think in their minds those players were going to be available. That's why they went out and made this trade. And maybe you're hesitant, but let me ask you, who will be Daniel Jones' alpha in this offense if it's not Darren Waller? If he is not the number 1, who will it be? Let's dive into this depth chart for a second. Truly, let me know. They brought in Paris Campbell. Okay, Paris Campbell's a nice player. He's obviously had, like Waller, some injury history, but even in his best year ever, his career high in receptions is 63. 63. And that's not making some sort of alpha impact. Isaiah Hodgins is there. His career high in receptions is 37. Wan'Dale Robinson, his size is going to limit him to a certain role in the NFL, and he's recovering from an ACL injury. Jalen Hyatt was a 3rd-round rookie pick who I believe has an extremely limited route tree. Sterling Shepard has torn both his Achilles and his ACL in the last 2 years. I mean, this team, I bet, was hoping one of those wide receivers would fall to them, JSN, Addison, or Johnston. But Waller was like this insurance plan. If these wide receivers don't fall to us, Waller will be our guy. They felt comfortable in making that move for Darren Waller. Look, Darren Waller, last time he put up an elite fantasy season, right? We go back to his 2020 season with the Las Vegas Raiders. He led the team in receptions, led the team in receiving yards. There was no Devontae Adams. We are now in a situation where Daniel Jones, in my opinion, clear wide receiver 1 on this team will be Darren Waller again. Okay? In 2021, that's a difficult season because he had those injuries. And then in 2022, Devontae Adams was clearly going to be the number 1 receiver on the Las Vegas Raiders. So we have the perfect formula for a top 3 fantasy finish. An elite athlete in Darren Waller. A receiving threat who has done it before. He has finished top 2 at the position. And a team who is desperate for someone to just be a reliable target on a consistent basis. If I were to book it right here, right now, I'm saying Darren Waller finishes the year with at least 110 targets. We'll see what he does reception wise. I mean, I think he could get all the way up to 130, 135 targets here in 2023. And if Daniel Jones is going to take that next step, which in Brian Dable's offense, Brian Dable looks like he's doing the right things and he is being that mentor that Daniel Jones needs, the guidance that Daniel Jones needs. If he's going to take that next step, it will be because Darren Waller returns to his star status. So I'm all in on Darren Waller in 2023. And if you look at his current price in ADP, like I said, tight end 7 and underdog. He's my tight end 3. In all the redraft mock drafts I'm doing right now, he's going in the 7th round. So if you can start your draft 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, impact quarterback, and then Darren Waller's your 7th round pick, that is a perfect formula in my mind to build a complete team. Now, yeah, I'll be drafting some Travis Kelce in the 1st round. I'll be drafting some Mark Andrews in the 3rd round. But I think at the end of the day, there's a chance that Darren Waller ends up being the best value at the tight end position this entire year. He is one of 4 tight ends that I could personally see leading their team in targets. Those tight ends are Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, oddly enough, and Darren Waller. So this offense is upcoming. It's improving. Daniel Jones is coming off a career year. We've got Brian Dable in the building running things. I think Darren Waller is going to have an incredible bounce back season, and I believe he's going to win some people fantasy leagues. I'm going to draft him. Let me know in the comments below if you're going to do so. I know that there's some injury concerns, but we see this all the time. You cannot predict injuries. They're not a predictive analytic for the most part. So do me a favor, drop a like. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.